You're tuned into the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast, brought to you by Zeno Pucks. Here are your hosts, Andy and Brian Matusi.
Welcome to the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. Andy and Brian here with you. As always, the show's brought to you by Zeno Pucks. It is Sunday, March 9th, which means the trade deadline has come and gone, and it turned out to be pretty eventful, despite how things were looking. But those last couple hours got pretty intense, and we got a lot to talk about today as a result of that. So I think now is a good time for me to bring Brian on in. What's up, man?
Not much, buddy. Yeah, it was a pretty crazy Friday afternoon, mostly other than like the Brock Nelson trade, which happened like right after midnight on Friday morning. Other than that, it was pretty quiet up until the later hours towards the end of the deadline. And it was all in all a relatively uneventful deadline, but the stuff that did happen was huge. I mean, we're not going to break down every single trade, but we're going to get into the ones that we feel really made the biggest impact. And these trades have all happened a couple days ago, so I'm not going to go through and itemize each trade, but we're going to get to the focal points of each trade. And we'll jump right into it with the one, everybody knew about the Rantanen trade coming. We'll get to that, but the one that knocked everybody's socks off was Brad Marchand going to the Panthers after 16 years with the Bruins, which is almost weird to say that he's not going to be on the Boston Bruins. If you could personify what it is to be a Bruin, you really think of guys like Brad Marchand. Obviously, you think of Bergeron, Chara as well, guys like Cam Neely, but Marchand really felt like he stuck to the identity of what the Bruins organization is for his entire tenure there, including, his Stanley Cup he won with the team and 2 more appearances in the finals after that. Just the embodiment of the city, embodiment of the organization. And it's kind of crazy that he's going to be putting on a sweater for a different team. That in mind, when you look at the team he's going to, it's pretty hard to argue against anybody beating the Panthers in the playoffs this year. So you're a fan of the Panthers. How are you feeling about this? And how are you feeling about the Panthers' chances going forward?
I have such mixed emotions about this, but overall great. Mixed emotions, I say, because it's just hard to see him anywhere but Boston. But I am ecstatic to see him come into Florida. I think putting Brad Marchand, Matthew Tkachuk, and Sam Bennett on the same team is absolutely unhinged behavior, but I'm very excited for that. I think he's going to perform well there. The one thing I can say that if you're a fan of Marchand, about him is everybody that's on his team loves him. He's a great locker room guy. He's just a great leader on and off the ice. Everybody loves him. If you're a fan of hockey, he's one of those guys where you hate him unless he's on your team. He's one of my favorite players in the league, so I am just over the moon. I hope they can run it back with him. I'd love to see him get another cup. I will say, I heard also, real quick side note, our condolences and thoughts of well-being go out to Elliot Friedman, who did not sleep for 36 hours as a result of the trade deadline. So God bless him. But, I heard that they were trying to get a contract extension done with Marchand in Boston, and the length of the contract they had reached an agreement upon. It was the amount of money that they were too far apart on. And it's my understanding that Marchand's agent said, Marchand was like, well, if we can't get a deal going, I do have somewhere I want to go. Turns out that place was Florida. So Marchand wanted to go to Florida. However, it's obvious he wanted to stay in Boston. He said that during the Four Nations. So it's kind of sad. I'm sure he was upset that they couldn't get something done in Boston, but you can't dwell on that now. You're going to a team that's a legitimate contender. They're the defending Cup champions, and they've got a good chance to run it back. I think he's going to be a great fit. I'm interested to see where they stick him on that team because the whole team is just good anyway. So there's going to be some movement on the forward lines there. I'm very interested to see what happens, who they move down. Obviously, he's losing his captaincy because they're not going to demote Alexander Barkov. So, but that's fine. And I don't think, and the grand scheme of things, I don't think that's something that he's going to be upset about. I think his focus is, all right, new team. I have a legitimate chance at winning a cup right now. Let's get settled in and locked in, and let's go win this thing. That's where I think he's at. I think if you're a Panthers fan, Panthers fans have notoriously hated him. Me being a Bruins fan in the past as well, I've always loved Marchand. So I'm excited to see him. Panthers fans, you should be very excited because he's a great player and he's a great guy on and off the ice. His teammates love him. He's a good locker room guy. I think this is a great pickup for Florida. What I'm interested to see is what happens in the offseason. Does he finish out this season with Florida and then go back and sign with Boston in the offseason? Or is this they're going to reach an extension in Florida? I'm interested to see what you think about that.
I don't think he's going back to the Bruins. I think if everything we've heard is true, that he was upset that the Bruins wouldn't give him the money he asked for, and it doesn't sound like he was asking for a lot. To me, it sounds like that's a guy that's like, I had my time there. I loved it there. I'll miss it there, but I'm not going back there. To me, it sounds like, and truthfully, any of these guys that go to the Panthers, I mean, you saw Tkachuk go there and fall in love with the place. Obviously, Dmitry Kulikov came back to the Panthers after spending years with them. I think obviously the guys like the weather there. Obviously, there's no income tax there. And for a team with right now with a really good winning culture, I don't see a reason for Marchand to not stay there. He obviously preferred to stay in the East because obviously he still has all his family over here. We kind of saw something similar with Linus Ullmark when he went to the Sens, wanting to stay, on the same side of the country as his family. So I don't necessarily see him going back, but I do think he'll plug in well in Florida. And as much as it would have been nice to see him spend his whole career as a Bruin, given the choice, I'm glad it was Patrice Bergeron that played all 20 of his NHL seasons with the Bruins.
Absolutely.
And that he didn't go somewhere else. His career predates the existence of this show. So for those who don't know, Bergeron is my favorite player of all time. So for me, it was cool to see him spend his whole career with one team. He obviously, like Marchand, won that same 2011 championship, was with the team for a couple more finals appearances, unfortunately, that they could not win. But again, as cool as it would have been to see Marchand stay in Boston for his entire career, I'm glad he's getting a chance to go win another cup. And he's going to probably have as good a chance as anybody now. And there are some real teams that have really built themselves up at this deadline. But the Panthers, who are largely the same as last year, minus Brandon Montour, really are now loaded up even more so. And, now you have the option. Obviously, their top line is pretty set in stone with Verhaeghe and Barkov and Sam Reinhart. But that second line, you can go with Tkachuk, Bennett, and either Evan Rodriguez or Brad Marchand, and then your third line is still Luostarinen, Lundell, and either, again, Marchand or Rodriguez. So they are loaded up front. They are pretty solid on defense, and if playoff Bob can be playoff Bob, then the Panthers have as good a chance as anybody to run this thing back.
That's what I was essentially trying to get at, is I was like, he's coming to a team that's pretty much like
ready to win again.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think if you're him at this point, yeah, you're hurt by Boston, but it's time to just put that on the back burner now. Think about that in the offseason right now. It's balls to the walls time. I mean, you've got a legitimate chance to win a Stanley Cup here. And granted, he's already got one to his name. That was 14 years ago. So
that's crazy. That was 14 years ago.
Isn't it? So I'm ecstatic for this, though. I'm just interested to see if he and Florida, one, even attempt to get an extension done or a signing done, or two, and if they do, if they could come to an agreement on something. Because I do think he would be a great fit to stay in Florida. I feel like this can really go any way as far as where he lands next season.
That's fair enough. I truly now, and again, the result of the playoffs will have a big impact. I truly think that he will stay with them regardless. I know obviously they got Ekblad to pay at the end of this year if he's going to stay with the team. They have some things they have to figure out as an organization. But if they win, I think that, or if they win again, I think that that makes a lot of decisions for some of those guys easier. I think Marchand would definitely want to stay. I think Aaron Ekblad, with the cap going up, I think the Panthers could hopefully find a way to squeeze him back under. We were talking about this on the phone on, I think it was Friday, that the only thing that the Panthers are really in jeopardy of dealing with is the fact that now this year they don't have Brandon Montour on defense, sucking up half an hour a night. And that makes a big difference in your playoff, in the way you plan for a game as a coach and in how they, deploy these guys on the ice during each of these games and each of these series. And so that'll be the biggest impact for the Panthers come playoff time, is how do they manage those minutes. And not that Aaron Ekblad can't handle the workload like Brandon Montour did, but when you have Ekblad and Montour, it's a lot easier than just having one. So some adjustments to make, but under Paul Maurice as their coach, I don't envision it being an issue. And again, if playoff Bob can be playoff Bob, the defensive play of the team is not the be all end all, and the fact that they're so loaded up front is will help them go a long way in these playoffs. I mean, essentially in my eyes, it feels like it's between them and Tampa in the East, and that's not to insult, Washington or anybody else, but I still don't think Toronto, even with their additions, which we'll get to, is quite there. And Washington's good. It's hard for me to see that group just because they've come out of nowhere. It's hard for me to see that group jump back into the fray and be better than all these teams. Carolina, who we'll get to later as well, doesn't look much better than any of their opponents. And after that, it's the Devils, who don't have Jack Hughes, and a bunch of teams fighting for wild cards. So to me, it feels like in the East, it's really between Tampa Bay and the Panthers.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to talk about Tampa Bay too. But we'll get to that. I do want to say, I think I've been saying this for a while. I've been very vocal about it, and I think this trade proves it. It's time for Don Sweeney to go in Boston.
Yeah, I mean, he did pretty good in the Carlo trade and the Brazeau trade, but he really got cleaned up pretty bad.
Yeah, and
I don't know. I just think letting a guy that's got that much tenure walk away, essentially, is kind of a slap in the face to the player and your fans.
Well, and you and I aren't insiders, so we don't know the full details. But what we do know is there was a pretty significant gap as far as what Marchand wanted in pay and what they were willing to give him. And it's my understanding that the Bruins told him, well, we're looking to pay for future performance, not past performance, which to me is complete bullshit. Because first of all, right now, this team's not winning a Stanley Cup in the next 5 years. I can tell you that. So that's bullshit right out of the gate. But second of all, everything this man has given to this team, remember, he used to be one of the dirtiest players in the league, and he turned his act around. And when he did so, he became one of the most elite players in the league. He's contributed so much to this team, both on and off the ice. He's such a great leader. He's a fan favorite, and he's a terrific hockey player. And he has more than earned a fair contract. And I think it's worth noting, he's never had a big payday in the NHL. And he's absolutely somebody that should have, but he was also someone who was willing to take lower payouts so they could put money elsewhere and build a team. So I just think I've never been a fan of Sweeney, and the last 3 years, I just really haven't been able to stand him. And this is the one thing where I'm like, it's time for him to go. And I think every Bruins fan out there will agree with me. The Bruins fan base is irate, and I think they have every reason to be.
Last thing I want to say on the Bruins before we move on, because again, we're going to start talking about playoff teams, and it's clearly not them this year with all the injuries and crap they've dealt with. The last thing I want to ask you is, who do you think's the next captain of this team? Because it seems the two obvious choices are David Pastrnak or Charlie McAvoy. In my eyes, it should be Charlie McAvoy. I know Pastrnak, first of all, is among the elitist of the elite in this league, but so is McAvoy too as a defenseman. I don't know. I feel like Charlie McAvoy just feels like more captain material. I don't know what it is about him, but what are your thoughts?
I agree with you that it should be Charlie McAvoy, and honestly, I truly think that is who it's going to be. And if it's not McAvoy, it's obviously got to be Pasta. There's nobody else on that team right now. First of all, those are the only two guys with tenure on that team right now.
So now with Carlo gone,
yeah.
I mean, who the hell has tenure other than like Pampas Lindholm for the last, 5 years or whatever?
Yeah. I will say I do think it will be a good fit for either player. I think the last couple of years, especially, Pasternak's really stepped up into a leadership role with the team. Like, he's really come into that leadership mentality. Aside from just scoring goals, I think it could be a good fit for either of them. But I think it could go either way. I think it will go to McAvoy. I don't know, man. I do know both of those guys are down bad right now mentally.
The only reason I feel like it might be Pasternak is just based on tenure. He's played 1.5 more seasons there than McAvoy has. They've gone through the same stuff together. So when you think about the fact that they're both leaders, I guess if you can only go based off the tenure, you got to go with Pasternak. But I feel like, I don't know, something about me just feels like McAvoy is a better choice. But again, I don't think there's a wrong choice for them. The only wrong choices in that organization are the ones Don Sweeney's made regarding his staff and players. And yeah, that's the way it goes. So it'll be interesting to see where the Bruins go from here. But where we will go from here is to the Mikko Rantanen trade. Rantanen goes to the Stars. This one will mention the return as 2 first-round picks for the Hurricanes as well as Logan Stankoven. So pretty good trade for the Canes as far as the return they get. If you just look at that in a vacuum, unfortunately for them, the fact that they give up Marty Necas for Rantanen and then lose Rantanen. Now, again, you get 2 first-round picks and you get Stankoven, who's already proven he can play in this league. So it's not a completely empty return for the Hurricanes, but as they sit right now, they're worse than they were to start the season because Necas and Rantanen both significantly better players than Stankoven, and that's not a dig at him. It's just Necas and Rantanen are elite hockey players. And the first-round picks they got are excellent. It's great, but first of all, Dallas is probably going to be one of the best teams in the league for years to come, at least the next 5-6 years. And so those are all going to be later first-round picks. Not that they can't be good players, but your chances get lower and lower as you get, especially as you get away from the top 10. So I dog on the Hurricanes a lot, and I really don't want to pick on them too hard here, but they really put themselves in a bad spot. They made a trade that they probably didn't have to make for something that was not sure as far as re-signing Rantanen. And you look at the deal he signs with Dallas. I think it's $96 million over 8 years, so $12 million a year. You look at the fact that Colorado couldn't put something together for him like that. It's just weird. The whole situation's weird. It feels like Chris McFarland, the GM of the Avalanche, feels like he swung and missed on trying to get Rantanen re-signed. The Avalanche did good in their trade. Marty Necas has fit in quite well in Colorado, I think. But the Hurricanes kind of dropped the ball here, and it's just weird after seeing the deal that he signed with Dallas that the Hurricanes and specifically the Avalanche couldn't find a way to get that deal done too. And now I know the Avs are kicking themselves because now you have Duchesne, who's in Dallas, who just eliminated the Avalanche last year, and now you have Rantanen there as well. So good landing spot for former Central Division players. It seems like the Dallas Stars like to just collect guys that don't want to be with their original teams anymore. So,
dude, the West is
for Dallas, yeah, the West is going to be crazy, and for Dallas, this is a huge deal. We've talked about them a little bit this year, and the biggest thing, obviously, for me in my eyes, was that the defense needed to be a little bit deeper. But again, with an elite goalie like Jake Ottinger, adding a guy that can score is, to me, just as important as getting somebody that can protect the house, because Rantanen looked great in his first game with Dallas yesterday against the Oilers. I know they didn't win that game, but Connor McDavid was great last night too. But Rantanen, a goal and an assist, and then McDavid, I think, had a goal and an assist as well. So that was just 2 teams that can score a shit ton duking it out, and obviously the Oilers win that one, but it was a pretty close comeback from Dallas. That looks like a team that's ready to, again, compete for a championship, and I know they didn't really get the defensive bolstering that they probably would have wanted, but I think picking up one of the most elite scores and more importantly, elite playoff scores in the league can really help. They extend Wyatt Johnston too. So now you look at the team and again, just adding that weapon. I know we've talked about the fact that they're missing Pavelski, and Rantanen is not obviously the same kind of player, but he's going to offer you that same elite level of playoff performance where, when he steps on the ice, there's not going to be really any wasted shifts, especially when it's time for the power play.
Oh, 100%. And, one thing that I saw is that people are saying Carolina didn't try hard enough to retain Rantanen. And I agree with that to a certain extent, but I think no matter what Carolina did in this situation, they weren't keeping him. He didn't want to be there. And once a player has that mentality, there's nothing they could have offered him $10 million a year and he probably would have been like, nah, I'm out of here. I think the guy just wants to win. And I think as history has shown, Carolina is not capable of doing that. Dallas looks like a team that's ready to do it. And like I mentioned, the West is going to be a bloodbath now, especially that Colorado-Dallas thing. But
and it's starting to look like they're destined to play each other. Colorado has passed Minnesota for that spot. And That looks like it'd be a hell of a first round series.
Yeah. And I mean, it would kind of suck because I'd rather see that as an Eastern Conference final matchup, but I know that's not possible.
I was going to say, because neither of those teams play in the East, so that would not be possible.
I meant Western Conference final, sorry. I don't know, dude. Eastern Conference final just comes out so much smoother than West. I don't know.
That's that East Coast bias. You could work for the NHL.
Okay. Nicely played. But I don't know, man. I think he's a great fit for Dallas. As you said, he's a great goal scorer, especially come playoff time. The guy's an absolute weapon. I remember I joked about ratting into the Panthers. That would have been insane. And probably
apparently the Leafs had a deal in place to get him too. That would have been crazy.
I don't know that
Matthews would have been nuts.
I know they tried, but I don't think Carolina had any interest, or he did. Somebody on the other side.
From what it sounds like Mitch Marner wouldn't waive his no move clause.
That's what it was. I'm sorry, yeah, because I saw they were going to send Marner for him, and I was like, that actually would have been a solid trade.
That would have been a good trade for both sides, I think. Although in my heart of hearts, I truly think Mitch Marner would like to stay in Toronto for his whole career, which again, that's probably why he invoked his no move clause. I think it's his boyhood team. He wants to stay there and play there forever.
Yeah.
And it's his right to do so. And you know what? If he doesn't, well, then he can go to the Wild, because I'd love to have him on my team.
I don't think there's a team in the league that wouldn't want Mitch Marner, even if you hate the Leafs.
Apparently not the Leafs.
Well, yeah, dude. But it's like, dude, I can't stand the Leafs, but I would take Mitch Marner or Austin. I would take anybody in a heartbeat. I mean, they have a good team, but I don't want to get off track here. Back to Dallas, back to Rantanen. I think, first of all, you'll never see him go anywhere again, I don't think, because Dallas is easily a contender for the next decade, I would say, with the team they've got right now. So,
well, this contract will take him till he's like 36 or 37.
Yeah.
So I envision this will probably, unless he wants to play until he's 40, I imagine he rides this and just finishes his career there.
I'm going to say the only way he doesn't stay there is if he starts to underperform and the team gets tired of him, or if the team starts to underperform and he gets tired of them and requests a trade.
Yeah, clearly being on an elite team has not stopped Rantanen from being moved in the past. I don't know. The whole thing is weird. And one day we'll have a 100% clear painted picture of everything that happened between him and the Avalanche, him and the Hurricanes, and so on. But it'll always just be weird to me that they even moved him. And again, for the Avalanche, it sucks they lost him, but Marty Necas has come in and fit in very well there. So
yes,
while they probably were stupid to move Rantanen, especially now that he's on a division rival, they still have an elite player on their team that they have in exchange. And again, an elite player that is under contract. So I don't know. It's just weird. It's weird. But again, the focal point of this trade is that Dallas is already one of the better teams in the league. They got even better. They have an unbelievable scoring threat. And again, you don't replace Joe Pavelski's role, but you more than replace his scoring with this. So this is a great move for them. I know the Central Division is going to be tough, that part of the bracket in the playoffs. Those top three right now, Winnipeg, Colorado, and Dallas. It's going to be a fight to get to the conference finals for all three of those teams. And obviously only one of them can make it theoretically. I mean, theoretically, none of them could make it if a wild card team bounces everybody, but I don't see that happening. I don't think any of the wild card teams will be good enough. But again, they did the right thing. They went out, they got their guy. Now it's time to run down the stretch, build the chemistry, and go for a cup.
I am very interested to watch the West in the playoffs this year. So,
well, let's talk about those other two teams then, because they made some pretty big moves as well. The Jets, obviously, still leading the league right now. They pick up Luke Schenn from Pittsburgh after he was moved to Pittsburgh from Nashville. So the Jets get Luke Schenn from Pittsburgh. They get Brandon Tanev from Seattle. Good depth moves on both ends. Luke Schenn's got quite a bit of experience in the league now. He's not a spring chicken anymore, but he'll slot in really well with the Jets, whether it's as a seventh D or just wherever they can put him in the lineup. Obviously, he can kill penalties. He's a great shutdown defender. Brandon Tanev is a really good forechecking, physical, fast-skating player. I mean, they call him Turbo, for Christ's sake. He's quick on the ice. He's agile. Obviously, everybody likes the goofy pictures he takes every season for his team picture. But he's a really effective player, and the style of hockey that the Jets play, I think, will be complemented well with Brandon Tanev in the lineup. Obviously, it's a team that can score a lot, but it's a team that really relies as well on their world-class goaltending to win games. And I think, again, adding a good shutdown defender like Luke Schenn into the mix there will certainly help that group.
I agree. I love Brandon Tanev. As you mentioned, he's extremely fast, but he's also my favorite thing. He's aggressive on the puck, which is what makes him great on the forecheck. He's a real solid winger. I think he's, no matter where he ends up, what team he would be on, he fits right in all the time. He's got the personality. He's another one of those guys. He's a great locker room guy. And now he's coming in a good player to a team that's already like thriving is an understatement. So I think that's a great fit for Tanev. As far as Luke Schenn goes, again, like you mentioned, he's not exactly, what'd you say, a spring chicken? He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's got some good experience under his belt. Again, I think he's still he's a good fit for a team that's already thriving. I think that'll boost his morale in the long run, which again makes him perform better going down the road. So I think these are two good pickups for a team that I personally think could have just stood fast at the deadline, not picked up anybody, and still been fine. So, but like we mentioned last episode, there's always room for improvement. So,
by the way, the definition of a shutdown defender, Luke Schenn, he's 35, by the way, so yeah, definitely not young. Yeah. But as far as shutdown defenders go, 5 points in 61 games is about as shutdown as it gets.
Yeah.
Either that or just non-producing. He is a -9 on the year, but again, he spent most of his season in Nashville, where everybody's a fucking minus.
Yeah, so, I'm a -9 in Nashville. So.
And honestly, to be a -9 on a team that's had that much struggles this year was actually pretty good. Again, I think he'll complement Winnipeg's system very well, and maybe take some of the load off Josh Morrissey and Colin Miller and Neil Pionk. So
what a great name.
Yeah, it is a good one.
Pionk.
Neil. Yeah, it's a good name. Let's name our son Neil. Anyways,
okay.
Instead of picking on Neil Pionk,
the guy who did nothing
we'll
wrong.
Move on, though. But yeah, that trade for the Jets, I mean, again, it wasn't an otherworldly trade, but again, it's a team that's already the best team in the league, and now they have more depth to add in. So when, inevitably somebody goes down with an injury in the playoffs, you have guys that you can slot right in. And truthfully, both of these trades for them probably pushed guys that were in their lineup previously out of the lineup, because I think Tanev you want in your lineup every night, and Schenn on most nights I think you want him in your lineup, just depending on the opponent. But generally speaking, that's a guy that's cracking any team's top six, unless you're like Colorado or somebody.
Yeah.
Speaking of the Avs, they made some trades. Most notably, obviously, they get Brock Nelson from the Islanders, and then get Charlie Coyle from the Bruins. Those are both excellent fits. Look, a team trying to get deeper down the middle, which I always preach on this show that you need to be deep down the middle in the playoffs. They go out and they do that. Nelson is a big-time veteran in this league, excellent player, well-rounded skill. He's not going to shoot the lights out every night, but he's going to be exactly what the Avalanche need. And the Coyle for Middlestat deal, I think, works for both teams. Middlestat, I think, will fit the Bruins system more. I think when he gets chances to play with David Pastrnak, I think those two will gel really well, because Pastrnak is obviously an elite shooter, skater, an elite passer too. But with a guy like Middlestat, who's really a pure playmaker, feeding him the puck, I think the Pasternak's numbers will see a boost. Certainly more so than they would ever see playing next to Pavel Zacha. But for the Avalanche, Charlie Coyle is an excellent center. He can play second, third line. He can kill penalties. He can be on the power play net front. He's a really, really good utility player. Can pretty much, really in a pinch, he can fill in on the first line. God forbid McKinnon, takes a puck and off the shin or something. I don't want to say anything too crazy, but and he missed a couple of shifts. You can put Coyle out there with the top line, and he's not going to be left behind. He's good enough to hang with the big boys, and definitely the kind of player the Avalanche need to get deeper down the middle. And I know they added, was it Jimmy Vesey as well?
Yeah.
To their roster, and they have Lindgren, and so. We've talked about the Avalanche and the goaltending problems in the past. They've solved those with Mackenzie Blackwood, and now they're extremely deep down the middle. They have probably what's the best defensive core in the league. It's really hard to look at the Avalanche and not think that they could be holding up the Stanley Cup in 3 months.
Well, dude, like you said when we were talking on the phone the other day, which aside from this show, the amount of time you and I spend talking about hockey is just disgusting. But you said this on the phone the other day, that this Colorado team is better than the Colorado team that won the Stanley Cup a couple of years ago.
Oh, by a mile, yeah.
So, and now they have good goaltending. And I'm not digging at Darcy Kemper because he did what they needed him to do. But
but he was like a 901 on their Stanley Cup run. I'm like, that's hardly serviceable, but they just kept scoring.
Again, which is great. When you're a team that can outscore your goaltending issues, no one's going to bitch about it. So now that they have their goaltending issue resolved, again, like you said with Charlie Coyle, not a career first liner, but definitely a guy that can fill in there when you need him to. I think that's great for them down the middle. Sucks to not see him in Boston. Obviously, that's his hometown, so I'm sure he's a little bummed, but again, all these guys coming out of Boston all went to contenders now. So
I was going to say, it gives you a boost when you're going to a team that's very likely able to win a Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah. Except Brandon Carlo, who went to the Leafs, who are going to bounce in the first round because they're the Leafs. But
I don't know. All those wild card teams, I don't think any of the wild card teams can beat the Leafs. I mean, I think of all the years to say the Leafs would lose in the first round, this is probably the one year where you're like, okay, they could probably. It's assuming they hold that number one seed. If they have to play Tampa or the Panthers, they're toast. But assuming they hold that number one seed and win the division, it'd be really embarrassing for them to lose in round one. I could easily see them winning this year. But again, if they run into Tampa or Florida in round two, which if they get the number one seed, they'll have to play one of those in round two. So I still think it'll be an early exit for the Leafs. But that aside, the Avalanche, their biggest criticism of them this year was that they were a one-line team. And they've rectified that. Again, getting Nichushkin back and having him perform helps. But again, you get Brock Nelson on line 2 now. Charlie Coyle looks like he's going to slide in on line 3 with Ross Colton and Yoel Kiviranta. It's a really fucking deep team. And then you look at the back end, Taves and Makar, Lindgren and Josh Manson, Sam Girard and Sam Malinsky's in the lineup right now. I think they have somebody injured on the defense, but I can't put my finger on it. Maybe I'm just going crazy. Maybe Malinsky really is their sixth defender. But obviously, again, the Avs still without Landeskog. Looks like he'll be having to make a big decision this offseason. He has not played one single game in the regular season for the Avalanche or playoffs since they won the Stanley Cup. Yeah, the last time he was on the ice in his Avalanche game uniform, he was holding the Stanley Cup. That's pretty sad.
It is.
So,
and he means sad as in it's sad, not sad.
It's depressing.
Yeah,
sad as it's not pathetic. It's depressing, dude. I mean, think about how good now, and this is not a dig at Jonathan Drouin at all, because he's actually, given what he's getting paid, he's played well in Colorado. But you're telling me that if line 2 was Gabriel Landeskog, Brock Nelson, and Val Nichushkin, that wouldn't be like one of the best second lines in the league? I mean, Lehkonen, McKinnon, and Natchez is already crazy, but those two are Nelson and Nichushkin with Landeskog healthy would be unbelievable. But go ahead.
I was going to say, you want to say one of the best second lines in the league. Just hearing those 3 names together sounds like a first line.
That is an all power forward. Fuck you. We're going to hit you as hard as we can line. That's like the Rat line in Florida now with Marchand and Tkachuk and Bennett. I mean, that's kind of the same energy, just a little less, visceral hatred for the 3 players on the line. I don't know. It's go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd love to see that Rat line, but I don't think we're going to.
I don't know. Prison rules, Paul. That's probably
prison rules, Paul, man.
That's probably when he rolls out in the playoffs, because in the playoffs it's all about get the puck in, get underneath the other team's skin, score, win the game. If you want to talk about getting underneath the other team's skin, how about the 3 most hated players in the league, not named Brandon Hagel and Nikita Kucherov, all on one line?
You're forgetting Tom Wilson, but yeah.
Yeah, Tom Wilson's not an effective enough scorer to him. Now that he's not blowing people's heads up every other week, he's kind of lost his touch with being the most hated. But Kucherov is fun because he'll make dirty ass hits, but then he scores 150 points a year. So you're like, you motherfucker. And Brandon Hagel, I've mentioned before, just the biggest shit talker and a guy who has not won jack shit in this league. So it's always kind of weird when he starts running his mouth. But again, Tampa Bay may win this year, so he could finally prove me wrong, or
but that's not
something other than talk insane shit on the ice.
Yeah, but even if Tampa wins the cup, that's not going to be because of Brandon Hagel. So
that could be. He's a good scorer, but again, he hasn't done jack shit for them yet. So
exactly.
In fact, since the year that he came there, I think his first year there was their year they lost to Colorado in the finals, and they've just gotten bounced
Coincidence?
every year since,
No.
which again, not his fault that they've been bounced every year. They've run into teams that are just better than them, but still.
You could argue that even last year, even though the Panthers smoked them in a gentleman's sweep, that was still a series I think could have gone either way, and it was one I truly expected to go 7 games. So
yeah, well, a lot of bounces help the Panthers too, and that weird behind the back save from Bob. I mean, just so many little things that happen in a game, and you look back, you're like, wow, that could have changed the complexity of the series. Like the Panthers sweeping the Hurricanes in 2023 in the conference final, all those overtime goals. It's like if those are Carolina's, all of a sudden the series is
correct.
3-1 Carolina, or the buzzer beater goal too. If like it goes to OT and Carolina wins, I mean. Just all the little nuances that if they were slightly different, I mean, the series would be shifted in a completely different way. It's kind of crazy how all this happens. But to get back to the Avalanche, I just want to say that, again, it's now with these additions, it's hard to look at the Avalanche and think that there's anybody better than them. And it's not because there aren't equally skilled teams, but you combine everything. First of all, again, they're stupid deep down the middle now. They have 2 really good scoring lines. They have their bottom 6 will be a couple of really good shutdown lines. Their defense is like the best in the league, and they're getting really good goaltending from Mackenzie Blackwood. So I don't know, man. As good as the Jets and Dallas are, it's really hard to see either of them being better than Colorado, especially when Colorado kicked the Jets' ass last year and they had Georgiev in that.
You know, I'm still going to say I think this is the year if Colorado and the Jets go up against each other. I think the Jets are going to come out on this one. But again, that's just one of those things. That one's going to be one that can go either way. And I will say if that ends up being a series, when it honestly inevitably does end up being a series, I think that's a series that's going to be a blowout for whoever wins it. I don't think it's one that'll go 7 games. I think whoever wins it is just going to smoke the other one. So
I see.
Yeah.
All right, so we had a couple guys that, as I like to say, push the needle, get traded. Again, Marchand, Rantanen, Coyle. Some guys that really help elevate teams to the next level in the playoffs. We're going to talk about a couple guys that were moved, but I don't think are the ultimate difference makers. But again, only time will tell. The Leafs pick up Scott Laughton up front and Brandon Carlo on the back end. Both good trades for the team. I mean, they get the right shot D that they badly need. They get a good third line center, which they badly need. They addressed arguably their team's 2 biggest weaknesses, and are for sure a better team than they were before the deadline. Without a doubt they are. But are those guys that push the needle? Brandon Carlo's got a lot of playoff experience under his belt. For his size, he skates very well. He's got a good shot. He's a good defender. He can kill penalties. He'll do everything the Leafs need him to do, and I don't think that's the issue. I just think that there's still something missing. I really am not crazy about John Tavares as the 2C. And again, not that he's having a bad year. I don't know. I think there's something better they could do there. I think the team really should have been giving William Nylander more looks at center. The guy was a center his whole junior career before he got to the league, and he's really never been given a fair shot at in the NHL. I just think there's not enough magic there for the Leafs, and again, the overutilization of Matthews, where they just refuse to not pass him the puck. They look off so many shots just to get Matthews the puck, whether it's even strength of the power play, and that's always seems to be their downfall. And unless that's addressed, I think they're going to be a quick exit this year. But they did get better. That's the ultimate reality. They did get quite a bit better than they were before the deadline. I don't know. I don't think either of these guys is what puts them over the top. I'm almost certain, again, assuming they keep the number 1 seed, that they'll beat whatever wild card team they play. But I just do not see them beating Tampa or the Panthers.
Well, I agree with you that neither of these pickups are what's going to put them over the top. But I think especially Brandon Carlo is a great fit.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, he's got a ton of playoff experience. He's played with mostly good Bruins teams, so he's capable of fitting in with that good talent around the team. I think
won't be unfamiliar.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a really good move for Toronto. I mean, it's not like you're adding an elite defender, but Brandon Carlo is still a great defender. So
yeah, he's still a high quality defender. I would say he's close to elite, but not quite.
Yeah.
But the one thing is, and I heard this on the Steve Dangle podcast, and this is actually a very good point. Brandon Carlo has been on the teams responsible for knocking the Leafs out of the playoffs like 3 times in the last 7 years. I mean, the Bruins have kicked the Leafs ass out of the playoffs now 3 straight series in a row. Well, technically 4, but one was before Brandon Carlo was there. And so he's been on the other end of this. He's seen what hasn't worked for the Leafs. And so the idea that he comes in and can maybe say, hey, this is what needs to be different in order for us to be successful as a group, because he's seen what hasn't worked for the Leafs from the other side. So he gets more of an unbiased look. He's watched them kind of implode as a team and lose all these series, and maybe being on the other side of that, he can say, this is what you need to do differently to get the job done. And not saying that one guy saying a few words will make all the difference, but sometimes just a fresh set of eyes on a problem can be the difference. And so who knows? I mean, maybe just the line chemistry blends perfectly and all of a sudden they're in the conference final. But to me, it just doesn't seem like it's enough given how good Tampa Bay and the Panthers are. I should have led with that with the Bolts and the Panthers already being this good, that the Leafs, while they are much better than they were, they shouldn't expect to be beating these teams yet. I just don't think they're quite there, especially given how experienced the Bolts and the Panthers are with making deep playoff runs now. I think they tried to do more and get ran, and I don't see it. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I will say having Brandon Carlo come in, I mean, he's coming from a rival, which I always think has got to be weird for the player. But coming from a rival, now you got a guy that whooped your ass for 4 years in the first round of the playoffs. Now, like you said, you got a guy who's got insider information on what they were seeing, what flaws they were seeing in your organization, and what they were picking apart. Now he's on your team, and again, just because he says, "Here's what we noticed," doesn't mean you're going to do a 180 and go win the cup right away. But I think it's a good move. And again, he's a good defender. He's not afraid to scrap either when he has to. So I think it's a good fit. It kind of bothers me to see him going to Toronto just, because he's going from Boston, but I think it's a good fit. And sorry, Boston, man, you guys just lost everybody.
Well, and it's kind of the dawn of a new era over there with, again, it's it's Pasternak and McAvoy and Swayman, and it's kind of the next generation with this group. Pasta and McAvoy are both in their late 20s. Swayman's in his mid-20s. This is kind of the dawn of a new era in Boston. This is the kind of the moment now where you look to start getting more out of guys like Johnny Beecher. And again, with Zacha in a reduced role, I actually think they can get even more out of him now. I think there's room for growth there, but the Bruins don't have a super deep prospect pool. So again, they're going to be leaning on guys like Mason Lowry and Wotherspoon to step up and really find that next level that they can play at. Where, again, if they don't, there might be some hard years coming up in Boston, but it's not the end of the world for them. They're probably out of the playoffs the next couple of years. But again, if they can get an enhanced play out of guys like Beecher and like Lowry, there's a chance for this team to kind of reload quick and get back into the mix, even if they're not going to be one of the elite teams. So it's not the end of the world in Boston, but first of all, a new GM I think is definitely necessary. And I think another year with Joe Sacco as the head coach is probably actually a good choice to make. He just needs to have a chance to have a full training camp with this group where he's directing traffic, so to speak. And again, a fresh set of eyes on a problem can make all the difference. So I do think a new general manager will help. There's still tools there. They have one of the best defenders in the league. They have one of the best forwards in the league. They have who normally is one of the better goalies in the league with Jeremy Swayman. I think there's opportunity for the Bruins. But I agree with you that shedding off elite talent like Carlo and Marchand and Coyle and even Trent Frederick to an extent. I mean, that's a great checking forward. Like, it hurts, but it's not the end of the world for the Bruins, although I do think the biggest changes and improvements to this team start with the general manager. I think he's just got to go.
Yep.
All right. Well, who's next? We got a laundry list here.
Dylan Cousins
going to Ottawa. So that's a good trade for Ottawa. I know Brady Tkachuk was absolutely heartbroken to see Norris go the other way in that trade. But Dylan Cousins is a great player. I do think he will help the Sens. I'm starting to be more convinced that the Sens can be a playoff team. But I also wouldn't be surprised. Again, you're talking about two best friends, Tkachuk and Norris, and to lose your best friend. I mean, Tkachuk was obviously very emotional to lose his buddy. And so that can also hurt team chemistry too. I mean, as much as it could help them with how good of a player Dylan Cousins is, and I think Dylan Cousins will actually get a boost leaving the Sabres, as most guys who leave the Sabres do get a boost. O'Reilly, Eichel, Reinhart, Rodriguez, the list goes on, Olmark. So I definitely think we'll see a boost in play from Cousins now that he's on a team that's very likely could be in the playoffs here. But for the Sabres, it's just, and we won't even get into the Sabres because they're light years away from anything important. But for the Sens,
like selling out.
Yeah, it's bad over there in Buffalo. For the Sens, they are, I would say, improved after this trade, but again, the chemistry could be at stake now. Obviously you really kind of put a little bit of emotional turmoil on your captain. It's not great, but there's still the opportunity for them to get in there and make some noise.
I think it's a good fit. I feel bad for Brady Tkachuk. Jesus, Tkachuk. He's down bad like McAvoy and Pasta are down right now. So, to see your buddy go is never easy, but I think this is a great fit. Excuse me, still battling that congestion. Ottawa's got a good opportunity on their hands moving forward now. I see them winning the cup this year? Absolutely not, but they're definitely a force to be reckoned with for sure now. So I'm interested to see how this turns out for them down the road. I think ultimately this is a good trade for both sides. Obviously it's going to have way more of an impact on Ottawa, but we'll see.
All right, now I have to play speculator, shit starter, rumor starter, whatever you want to call it. Let's play hypothetical. Let's say the Senators miss the playoffs.
Okay.
Brady Tkachuk has his current contract ends in 2028, but on July 1st, no movement clause will kick into his contract. If the Sens miss the playoffs, given that Brady Tkachuk just watched his best friend get traded away, wouldn't it be wild as hell if he requested a trade to the Panthers to go play with Matthew before the first? I would love, after watching them play at the Four Nations, all I want to see is them play on the same team because that would be hilarious. I would love a Panthers second line that could feature Sam Bennett, Brady Tkachuk, and Matthew Tkachuk, or Brad Marchand, Brady Tkachuk, and Matthew Tkachuk. I think there are some really good opportunities there. I doubt it. I doubt the Sens would ever go for trading him to a divisional rival, but can you fucking imagine? That would be great.
I can imagine that, and it would be hilarious. However, I've been hearing, before you just said that, I've been hearing people say that since the Four Nations face-off. So, is it going to happen? No. And I think Brady Tkachuk stays in Ottawa regardless, because I think that's just where he wants to be. I know him and Matthew want to play together, but I don't foresee him going to Florida. I think he's content where he's at. But as we just saw with Brad Marchand, anything is possible.
Yep. I mean, you never truly know. It's just weird, but it would be so fun to watch them play together. I don't think it happens, but again, I wanted to be a shit starter with that one. So, let's move on from the Sens there. Again, I think, they'll probably creep into the playoffs, but I question how far they may go given what they're up against. Their likely first round opponent would be Toronto or Washington, and I don't think they can beat either of them in a 7-game series.
Right.
The Tampa Bay Lightning, this is a team that can definitely win a 7-game series. They get back Yanni Gourde, who again was there for many years with them already. Won a couple cups with them. Goes to Seattle in the expansion draft. I don't remember if he signed as a free agent or if he was their expansion pick, but he went to Seattle. Now they get him back from Seattle, and they also get Oliver Bjorkstrand. And that was a pretty healthy trade on both sides. Seattle has kind of spun their tires these last 2 seasons now, but Seattle picks up a couple of first rounders in the future and a second rounder this year. There was a third team in this deal that I forgot to write down, but Easimon also goes the other way in this deal. But Tampa Bay, again, adds Yanni Gourde, who's a proven playoff performer. They get Bjorkstrand, who's a great player, and I think will fit in well there. And again, a team that's already very good. Vasilevsky's found his groove. I mean, they're as good as they can be, and the loss of Stamkos has clearly not hindered the team. I'm still not crazy about them on the back end per se, but again, similar to a situation like in Dallas and in Winnipeg, you have world class, and the Panthers too. You have world class goaltending. You can kind of maneuver around the lack of defensive depth. But again, Tampa Bay is such a score at will team. I mean, they're very much like the Panthers in their construction, which makes for great matchups whenever they play each other. But Tampa Bay, without a doubt, got better. And I think, again, assuming they're playing the Panthers in the first round, it really feels like whoever wins that series will be the team to represent the East in the Stanley Cup final.
Absolutely. And, I do want to point out that even though Tampa lost to Boston, the Providence Bruins, 4-0 yesterday, don't let that fool you. This is a very, very dangerous team. And, as we mentioned, when Vasilevsky is on his shit,
he's on.
I mean, he's the best goalie in the league when he's on his shit. Obviously, that title rightfully belongs to Connor Hellebuck right now, but and I think that's going to be, honestly, if anything is Tampa's downfall, I think it's going to be if Vasilevsky is having an off series. I think that's ultimately what it comes down to for Tampa moving forward. But I do love that Gord is back in Tampa. I just think that's where he belongs. He's probably over the moon to be back, especially with a team that's as good as Tampa is right now. And I agree with you. Whoever comes out of a Panthers Tampa series is going to be the team that represents the East in the Cup final. It's so wild that two Florida teams have just been dominating the East the last few years, and that's wild to me.
They're both constructed very well.
They are. And I got to give credit to the way these teams are managed. They're so very well managed. And, especially with the Panthers a couple years ago, everybody thought Bill Zito was an idiot between trading Huberdeau for Tkachuk and
included.
Yeah, including me, and hiring Paul Maurice, which I was also not a fan of. But I'm so glad I was wrong about both of those, man. Those two moves right there made the Florida Panthers contenders for a minimum of the next 10 years. No question.
Now, I do want to mention something else. You said you were not correct about Bill Zito's moves, including the Tkachuk trade and the Paul Maurice hiring. You also texted me the other day and said there's no reason for the Panthers to make another move.
Yeah.
They're already good. They don't need to get better. And then they got Brad Marchand and they got Seth Jones, and you're like, okay. So
yeah.
A reminder that we are not general managers, so sometimes take the shit we say with a grain of salt.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, and that's one thing I noticed too. When especially when I post clips from our show on TikTok, people just get all in their feelings and get all kinds of offended. Your opinion's wrong. Well, that's why they're opinions, man, and that's why we're on here giving them. But just because we're on here saying shit doesn't mean you have to agree with what we're saying.
Well, people can be wrong about anything. That's ultimately to the truth. I mean, what they're saying online is mostly opinion-based stuff. I mean, my favorite one to pick, and again, I love picking on the Sabres, but when Jack Eichel left Buffalo, the Sabres fans were like, enjoy that washed-up hack. He's not cut out to be an NHL player anyways. He's always injured, blah, blah, blah. Well, he gets his surgery, wins the Cup with Vegas. Probably should have won the Conn Smythe, and now he's one of the best players in the league, as he was touted to be when he was drafted, but the Sabres nearly fucked that up. So, people will say things and just be dead wrong, and they'll just say things to say them or because they're feeling emotional or whatever. But again, ultimately, a lot of these are opinions, so sometimes people just need to get the fuck over themselves.
I agree. Hey, before we move on, though, I do think we're due for a break here because I'm sure Xenopucks would like to get their message out there.
They probably do. I've heard that they like their product as much as we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's let them talk about it.
Yeah.
Let's let you talk about it specifically.
I was going to say, I'm going to be the one that talks about it. So we're going to step away for a minute for a word from Xenopucks. So stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. It's hockey season, and you're looking to work on your stick handling or maybe even your shot, but ice time just isn't an option for you right now. Luckily, our buddies over at Xenopucks have got you covered. They've developed an elite off-ice practice puck that, in addition to looking like the real thing, is the same size and weight as a regulation hockey puck to give you that authentic feel on the end of your stick. It works better than other off-ice practice pucks on almost any surface, whether you use it on hardwood, carpet, concrete, or even asphalt. Xenopucks glide like a real puck on ice. So if you're looking to improve your game without setting foot on the ice, head over to www.xenopucks.com and get yourself a puck. Check out their merch selection and be sure to follow them on Instagram at Xenopucks.
Okay, welcome back, Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. So thanks again, as always, to our friends over at Xenopucks. Actually, when we were down in Columbus, I don't remember if you mentioned this on the last show, but when we were down in Columbus, you stopped at Pure Hockey and got a picture with one of the Xenopucks they had on the shelf. So
they didn't just have a Xenopuck on the shelf.
You said they were everywhere.
It was an entire display stand dedicated to Xenopucks. There was easily 100 Xenopucks on this thing. It was incredible.
That's pretty cool. So always love to hear from our friends over there, and again, offering a great product. So yeah, please go check it out because it's cool. One of our cousin's children has one. I actually gave him the one that they sent me, and he loves practicing with it. So definitely a cool product that they. Oh, does he? Did he get another one?
Remember, they were at a tournament in Kentucky.
You're right.
There,
yeah.
And they gave him another one. Yeah,
Wow, man, my memory sucks.
Yeah.
But yes, so great product. Please, again, especially if you're a parent with a young hockey player, obviously, as we say in the read, ice time can not always be the easiest to get. Please check out this product. It really is fantastic. So let's move back into the trade talks. Again, we mentioned towards the top of the show, Luke Schenn went to the Jets. Originally, he was packaged with Tommy Novak in a trade that sent Novak to the Penguins. Novak is still with the Pens. It's been kind of rough to watch what's happened in Nashville this year, and as well as Pittsburgh too. It's really kind of irritating that a team with Crosby, Malkin, and Letang just can't find the goaltending to be effective. But in Nashville, it's really, really been a disappointing year for them. And so I'm glad to see them kind of shedding some pieces off and, trying to hopefully reload this summer and, shake off this season as just a bad year and move on. I think coaching is part of the problem in Nashville. I just don't see that Burnett's the guy. I know he had them playing great down the stretch last year. And again, it just seems like a team that was on a hot streak. And now they can't get the system to work with the guys they have. And it's tough to see. But again, Nashville, I think, needs to come at this with a fresh look next year. We've talked about needing fresh sets of eyes on a problem in this podcast already. And I think a coach in Nashville is the necessary change.
I've been very vocal about that. Pretty much since Brunette's been the coach of Nashville. I was like, he's not the right fit. The most he is an assistant coach at the NHL level, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. I totally think that a coaching change is necessary. It's overdue in Nashville. So the question is, who do you bring in at this point, though?
Joel Quenneville. No. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, right? So it's easy to say, "Oh, fire the coach." Okay, well, who's his replacement? You need a guy that that is good at coaching elite players, and B, a guy that's available. And it's hard to find both of those things because most of the guys that are good with this stuff already have their jobs. So It's sometimes tough to find the guy you want. In my eyes, in my head, it's funny because I almost picture Barry Trotz being the perfect candidate to coach this team, but he's already the general manager. So
do the Mike Milbury and do both.
Yeah, well, you know how well that worked for Mike Milbury. So,
that's because he's Mike Milbury.
Yeah, that's also true. Look, Trotz would be a great coach, actually, but it's hard to argue about the job he's done as GM. Like, he went out, he got all the big fish. He put together, on paper before this season, this looked like one of the best teams in the league, and I would still argue on paper it is and should be. I questioned and I haven't watched enough Preds games to know, but I questioned the deployment of his players and the utilization of them. And obviously it's not like guys like Stamkos and Marchand aren't getting ice time, but clearly this hasn't worked. I mean, they trade Carrier towards the beginning of the season, which it sucks for them because I think he was a perfect fit there. But, they shed Novak, they trade Tomasino, they trade Schenn. Like, they get significantly worse on paper. And again, they can go out this summer and add and redo this team so it's effective on the ice. But part of it just seems like the coaching, man. It's got to be. I mean, these players are all too talented to suck this much.
Well, I want to prove that it is the coaching, I want to point something out. When Andrew Brunette took over as coach of the Panthers, everybody thought the Panthers looked good. But if you think about it, every win they had was a come-from-behind win, damn near. And I think the team was pretty much coaching itself at that point. And that was just because that team was so offensively stacked, it didn't matter. with that being said, I think it's evident now, because if you look at the Predators on paper right now, they should be winning every other game at this point, and they're not. So when the odd ice product isn't working, and you have a good front office, and the players aren't the problem, that you got to look at behind the bench. And I've never been an Andrew Brunette fan. I'm not trying to take a dig at him by any means. I just don't think he's right to be a head coach in the NHL. So I don't know. If you're Nashville, I think it's time to look elsewhere as far as coaching goes.
I don't think you're wrong in saying that at all. It's just weird to see again how bad they are given what they have. And again, Stamkos, Stanley Cup champion, Marchand, Stanley Cup champion, Brady Shea, obviously spent a lot of time making deep runs with Carolina. So it's not truly don't think it's a personnel problem. I know Saros isn't the most consistent goalie this year, but I don't think it's a personnel problem. You have Yossi, again, their back end's still very good. Yossi obviously leading the charge for that group, but again, to start the season, you had Yossi and Shea and Carrier and Lausanne, and Shen. This was a really solid group, and that just didn't perform. And these are all guys who have performed. I mean, not Yossi included, obviously, because he's only been a Predator. But again, Carrier's been good in Montreal. Shen has been good, pretty much has been good or usable everywhere he's played in his career. And Shea obviously was great with the Rangers and then great with the Hurricanes. I don't know. It's just weird to me. And I'm sure losing McDonough wasn't great for the Preds, but it's still one of the best groups. And again, you're loaded with players who, when they played on other teams, were outstanding players. It's hard for me to imagine that this is a personnel issue. I just think the deployment, utilization of these guys, they haven't found the right chemistry. I think, I don't know. I just think it's got to be a coaching issue. It's the only thing that makes sense with this group, given the talent they have. But we're going to move on, and we're going to talk about a team that really has no issues now. Vegas, they picked up Riley Smith from the Rangers. Again, Smith won the Stanley Cup with the Golden Knights a couple of years ago. He was a day one Golden Knight, so kind of good to see him go back home, so to speak, even though that's not really where he started his career. But again, a great fit in Vegas. He was a great fit with the team when they went to their first Cup final and their first season, and an excellent player for them in their Stanley Cup run a couple of years ago. And now, he's back home, and I'm going to get a chance to make another deep run with Vegas. They look like they're ready to go. Not a team that needed to add a whole lot. I think most of their success will depend on the play of Adin Hill in the playoffs. Obviously, the forward and the defense core. I talk about how good Colorado's defense core is. You could probably put Vegas right up there with them. This is just an extremely good group. I know they're waiting on getting Theodore back from injury, but when they're fully healthy, I mean, Theodore, Petro, Noah Hannafin, Braden McNabb, they have so many weapons they can use, and they're an exciting group to watch. I know a lot of people don't like Vegas because of all the cap bullshit they've done, but everybody can do it, as I always say. So this is an extremely talented group. Again, they're still waiting on getting William Karlsson back, but just looking at the play of guys like Mark Stone and Jack Eichel, who are just having outstanding seasons, and it helps that they play together. But this group is as talented, and we mentioned with Colorado, this group is as talented or better than the group they just won the Stanley Cup with. And now, again, they add another proven playoff performer like Riley Smith, and it's really, really easy to paint a picture of them holding up the cup at the end of this year.
Yeah, and everybody, I feel like, always worries about Vegas, regardless of who's on the team. They've just been a juggernaut since they came into the league, and I think that's why there's so many Vegas haters out there, is because this team, since its inception, has just been annoying. Annoying is not the wrong word, I'm sorry. But if you're not a fan, why is this team so damn good their first 8 years in the league? I think that's what has everybody frustrated. So
it's because you got ownership that bought in from day one.
Yeah,
that's the biggest thing. The dollars have never been an issue for them because Bill Foley's opened up the pocketbook every time.
I mean, then that's exactly it. When you have a front office that's doing whatever it takes to win, you're going to be set up for success. Not only that, they have a diehard fan base. The team is fun to watch, whether or not you want to admit it or you're a fan or not of that team. They are fun to watch. They're a very dangerous team, and I can easily see them lifting the cup again this year without question. Again, the West is going to be a bloodbath, and it's between Winnipeg, Dallas, Vegas, and Colorado. It's anybody's guess, but holy shit, are there a bunch of juggernauts in the West? But I think Vegas I think the two big juggernauts in the West are Vegas and
Dallas,
yeah,
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg.
There's so many good choices, and what's funny is how I named the great defenders on Vegas. I didn't even Zach Whitecloud and Nick Hague didn't even come to mind, and they're both outstanding defenders. So
I forgot about Hague.
I know it's hilarious that they just have every guy in their defensive chart is a usable defenseman or an elite one, and I know, again, I mentioned they're missing Shea Theodore, who's having a great year, really, almost a point a game as a defenseman, 7 goals, 41 assists in 55 games. And he's only averaging 22 minutes a night. So to be almost a point a game, averaging 22 minutes a night it's just really fucking good. And I mean, Shea's a great skater. He's great. He got, great offensive vision. So obviously he's an effective defender anyways, but to be almost a point a game and you're not even playing 25 minutes a night. I mean, you think of guys like Makar, who usually playing 25 minutes to half an hour a night, or Miro Haskin and the elite of the elite, and Shea Theodore's not a guy that usually pops up in that kind of conversation, but he's right up there with those guys. And you look at a guy like a Werenski too, another guy who can play half hour a night. Usually the big scoring defenders are the guys that are playing 25, 26 minutes a night, but Shea Theodore is just really effective with the time on ice he has, and he's never a guy that forces plays, but his vision's so good. He's got great guys to distribute the puck to: Eichel, Stone, Dorofeyev, Barbashev, Hurdle. I mean, the list goes on and on and on in Vegas with the great players. But again, like Colorado, you look at this roster, and if Aiden Hill can be a 9-10 or better in the playoffs, I can't imagine a team that can beat Vegas. So this race in the West is just absolutely disgusting at how good some of these teams are. And I think it will only be more fascinating to watch as we go down the stretch.
I agree. And it's going to be kind of a nice change of pace because it's mainly just the last several years, the East has been dominating everybody. The East was always the dominating force in the league. So this is going to be a nice change of pace to kind of even out the quality of the playoff hockey we're getting in both conferences. And we still got some good playoff hockey on both sides last year too. But I think the West is going to be a true all-out war this year in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, it'll be fun. So we're going to move away from Vegas, and now we're going to talk about a couple teams that are not nearly as good a spot as the Golden Knights are. First, I want to talk about the Devils. Jack Hughes being done for the year. Just had shoulder surgery, I believe it was, after that collision he had with Jack Eichel a couple of weeks ago. What's funny is on the podcast, I said I couldn't remember what Devils player it was, and it was literally the best player that they have. So that was a swing and a miss by me, but I'll own that one. But yeah, Hughes done for the year. Obviously a huge hit to the Devils. Any success they have in the playoffs now is really going to be on the shoulders of Jacob Markstrom, because without Hughes leading the charge on the offense, and they still have good players. I mean, they still have, guys like Timo Meier and Jesper Bratt. Like there's talent there. It's just not nearly as dominant without Jack Hughes. And again, when you take your number one center out of the lineup, then you have to start plugging in players in spots where they aren't normally at, and that's how you lose line chemistry. And again, it quickly becomes the responsibility of the goalie to drag the team to the promised land. And not that I think Jacob Markstrom can't do it, but he's not one of those. He's not your Connor Hellebuck. He's not your Jake Ottinger. He's not your Andrei Vasilevsky, your playoff Bob. He's not Linus Ullmark with the Bruins 2 years ago. He's a really good goalie, but like you look at his numbers this year, 907 save percentage. I think that's just a tick above league average. 234 goals against is one of the best in the league, actually. But I don't know. It's just fascinating to see where the Devils will go from here. They wanted to approach this deadline as if Hughes was still in the lineup, because they wanted to reward the players for battling hard this season. But at the end of the day, you still don't have Jack Hughes for the playoffs. It's a different looking team altogether. And unfortunately for the Devils, what could have potentially been a deep playoff run, I think is now going to become a very short one.
I think it's interesting too how we always say you can't rely on one guy to carry a team, but on the flip side of that, this is a perfect example of how much of an impact one guy can have on an entire team. And so this is a huge blow to New Jersey, a team that was looking like they were on the up and up, especially, they had a nice coaching change this offseason with Sheldon Keefe. Good move for him and for the Devils. I think again, this was a team that was equipped to make a deep playoff run, and now you're everything's kind of in limbo now. I mean, do you rely on one guy to carry the team? No, but with a player like Jack Hughes, that's who you need to have success in the playoffs. So I'm not saying they're incapable of doing anything without him, but it's going to be a whole different animal now.
Yeah, I would agree. Couple more trades that the Bruins made that I do want to address because the players involved are on playoff teams. The first one, Trent Frederick goes to the Edmonton Oilers. I believe he's still injured right now. Yeah, it's still dealing with a lower body injury. When he comes back, I think that'll be a good fit for the Oilers. I would say, based on what I saw on a bunch of YouTube comment sections, it looks like Oilers fans are largely irritated with Stan Bowman not doing a damn thing, essentially, at the deadline. He couldn't get a deal done to get Rantanen or Marchand or any of these big names over there. I know a lot of Oilers fans are hopeful Kane's back for the playoffs. Frederick will definitely help. That physical brand that he brings to the table will certainly help the Oilers, since they couldn't seem to be bothered to get better on defense. I think Frederick will plug in good up front. And again, a guy that can play both sides of special teams will really help the Oilers out. But they're really, again, with the arms race going on in the West, I wonder, again, it seems like they're destined for a first-round matchup with LA again. I wonder how they will be able to hold their own, given that they haven't played very well recently. But even assuming they beat the Kings in the first round, again, you're probably going up against Vegas in round 2. Or if you slip to a wild card spot, you might be the poor bastards that draw the Jets in the first round. And so even though the Oilers are, again, better than they were before the deadline, they're not nearly better enough to compete with these unbelievably good teams now, that big four in the West.
Yeah, if you're someone listening to this or just watching, keeping an eye on the league this year, and you're wondering, does Edmonton go back to the final this year? The answer is absolutely not. And one thing you brought up that I'm glad you did, you definitely, if you're Edmonton, you don't want to allow yourself to slip into a wild card spot. Now, with that being said, and that's just for not wanting to play Winnipeg.
Or Vegas.
Or Vegas, or pretty much anybody that's not you or the Kings.
The wild card teams you're either drawing the Jets or Vegas in round 1, and you might as well just plan your Cozumel getaway or your Cancun getaway because you're playing for 2 weeks and then you're done because you're not beating the Jets, you're not beating Vegas in round 1. It just isn't happening.
And we always say, and it's a fact, once the regular season's over, once you've made the playoffs, anybody can win the Stanley Cup, obviously. But you got to look at this from a realistic standpoint. And with that being said, I don't care how bad the Oilers may be leading up to this point, but I don't see any world where the Oilers lose the series to the Kings. I just don't.
I don't either. LA is considerably better this year, but I don't know. Honestly, the Oilers and the Kings have both kind of been crap lately, so I'll be interested to see how it goes. I mentioned the poor bastards that'll draw the wild cards in the West. As it sits right now, the first round matchups would be Vegas versus the Wild and Calgary versus the Jets. So I would like to thank the Wild and the Flames for their services, but I do not envision them getting past Vegas or the Jets, barring a miracle for either club. I mean, you look at the situations they're in. Look, Calgary has had a much better season than anybody's envisioned, I think, to this point, but even with how good Dustin Wolf has been for them, it would not be enough to beat the Jets. And the Wild, who can't seem to stay healthy, will get clobbered by Vegas. And again, I know the Wild, we'll get to them in a sec because they're a part of one of these Bruins trades. I just don't see it there, even if they're fully healthy. Vegas is just so much better than them that I don't think that there's any wiggle room for the Wild to win that. So 2 unfortunate souls will be wild card teams, and we'll find out who they are. But you know what? I mentioned the Wild. Let's get into that trade, actually. That's the final piece of the puzzle for all these Bruins trades. So they send out big man Justin Brazeau to the Wild. In exchange, they bring back Jakub Lauko, who was a great fit with the Bruins his first go-around, and actually I thought was a good fit in Minnesota. The Bruins also acquire center Marat Huznadinov. Great young player, really, really good hands, really fast skater. Really could never crack the top 6 with the Wild, although I don't think he was given a fair enough opportunity to do so. But he's a good young player with a lot of speed, and he's only 22 years old. I think he's got plenty of time to flourish into a bigger role. And with the Bruins, this kind of youth movement that they're doing, this is one of the trades I think they did well on it. Again, they bring back Lauko, who had a great tenure with them. I think he's a great bottom six player, very underrated. His speed is really good, and he's got a really good shot. But who's Nadinov? There's a lot of upside there for the Bruins. So of all those trades, it's probably the one the Bruins did the best on. But again, only time will tell. It's just weird to see the Bruins shedding off all these guys. But for the Wild, they bring in a guy who, again, he's 6'6". You really can't teach size. So to bring in a guy who can probably drop in on the third line with Marcus Foligno, and I would assume Freddie Gaudreau or Ryan Hartman or wherever they want to plug him in. Not a horrible move for the Wild, but the Wild wanted to go into this deadline and make a big splash. But because the injuries to Kaprizov and Brodin and Eriksson Ek were not season ending, they couldn't really put them on they have them on LTIR, or at least Kaprizov is, but because he'll be back before the end of the season, they couldn't do what Vegas has done and Tampa Bay's done and what the Panthers have done, where you can go out and get another big name because you have the cap space. They didn't have that luxury to them. So Bill Guerin, instead of gambling the farm, kind of stood pat where he was, but he brings in a guy with some size that helps the Wild. But as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, there's not a chance in hell, even when they're fully healthy, that I could see them beating Vegas or the Jets. Or if they crawl back into that third central spot, I think there's no way in hell they're beating the Stars because they never beat them. So it's, again, you're in a team that's between a rock and a hard place. They're close to the end of those god awful Suter and Parise buyouts. But they're just not in a spot right now where they can compete. But as a fan of the team, I'm glad Guerin didn't just give up a small fortune to go get guys that are rentals. So I know a lot of Wild fans are impatient with the team, but you have to be smart about this. There is a chance for long-term success. There are some good prospects coming through the pipeline very soon for this team. So you can't give that up to try and win a playoff round or two. Now it sucks and you hate waiting because these are entire years of your life that you're waiting, but you trust that the process eventually does work out. And I'm glad as a fan of the team to not see them just give it all away. And again, they don't have a physical identity really outside of Marcus Foligno. So you bring in a guy like Brasso that can put a spark into your lineup and maybe get some of these guys to buy in a little more to the physical game. So I like the deal for both teams. But again, for the Wild, I don't think it will translate to any playoff success. And for the Bruins, I still think Sweeney needs to go.
Yeah, look, we could do a whole episode on why Don Sweeney needs to go, but on the other side of that, and hopefully I'm not proven wrong about this, but I personally think Billy Guerin's one of the smartest GMs in the National Hockey League. Again, you said it earlier, I'll say it again. I think you need to trust the process here. And even if you don't like the way things are going, at least you're not Detroit right now, who just brought back Peter fucking Mrazek. Great move, Steve Yzerman.
Yeah, boy, yeah. We might have to do a breakdown on the Wings after this season because the Yzer plan has
not worked. Yeah, and it's kind of disappointing. I don't want to get off track here, but it's disappointing when you see those Tampa teams that won the Cup were Yzerman's teams that he built. So that gave hope for him coming home to Detroit. Obviously, it hasn't worked out. That's something we can cover at a different time. As far as this trade goes, I think it is a good move for both teams. I think Brasso will fit in just fine in Minnesota. I liked him in Boston. Again, the dude's an absolute unit. So Minnesota, generally speaking, is a good team. A better team than Boston is this year, so this is a better fit for him, I think. With Lauko coming back, I liked him the first time he was in Boston. We'll see how things go. This is a different team than when he was on it the first time. So yeah, that Boston's really, really turning into a dumpster fire, and 90% of it's because of Don Sweeney. And I would argue Cam Neely too. I think they both need to go.
By the way, I'm just looking at the standings right now. This is completely off topic from where we were, but I can't mention the Panthers and Lightning being destined to play each other. Panthers, winners of their last 6, are in first by 4 points in the Atlantic. So that guaranteed Toronto wins in the first round. Quickly has vanished.
Yes.
I thought they still had a couple point lead. I haven't checked the standings in longer than I thought, I guess. But Toronto's lost their last 3. Panthers actually the hottest team in the league right now. Have won their last 6, 8 of their last 10. So who knows? Florida might have a quick path to the conference final. I don't want to put the whammy on them, but again, if they win the division, they're going to draw either the Sens, the Blue Jackets, the ailing Rangers, or maybe the Red Wings. All teams that they can beat pretty handily, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
Although Tkachuk versus Tkachuk matchup would be hilarious. But anyways, I'll let you get back to what you were doing. I just saw that. I'm like, wait a second. We just spent a whole hot minute talking about how the Panthers and Bolts are going to have a hell of a matchup in round one, and they might not even play each other.
Oh, I don't really have much else to say about the Brazeau trade. So,
all right, well, we can move on to our Ovechkin goal tracker now that we are down to the final 10 to go. So Alex Ovechkin at 885, 9 goals from tying the record, 10 goals from breaking it. The Capitals, I believe, have 20 games to go or 19 games to go now. So they are 41, 14, and 8. That would put them at 63 games played. So, 19 games left on their schedule. It's exciting times. If Obi can score at half a goal a game, which he's more than capable of doing, I think we will have no issue seeing this record broke by the end of the year.
Yeah, I'm at this point, I'm hoping we see it broken by the end of the year. Now that he's so close, I don't want to wait till next season. I want
it to be same here. You just because nothing's guaranteed in life, so we want to see it done. He's actually on pace right now, I believe, to break it in fewer games than Gretzky too. For Gretzky to get to his 894, Ovi's on pace to get 895 before he matches Gretzky's games played. So really exciting times ahead. And you wonder, or not wonder, but you at this point know with certainty that if it were not for 2 lockouts and COVID, that Ovi would already be the all-time goals leader. And it's kind of crazy to think. So we're getting close. We'll obviously keep an eye on that, and we'll update that with every show. Although, I mean, who knows, if he has a couple of really hot games, this thing might be broken in like 2 weeks, which is just a total mindfuck right now. So rather than try and process that, we'll just wait till he does it so we can be mind blown on that podcast.
Yeah.
I think it is now time, before we do our Blue Jackets segment, I think you mentioned while we were at break that we had a question. So let's get to that, and then we'll do our Blue Jackets segment before we close out the show.
Sounds good. Hold on one second.
All right. Sounds good to me. And while you pull that up, I'll get our stuff ready for our Blue Jackets segment, because not that they did anything super crazy, but there's a move they made in a contract extension that they signed that are definitely worth noting.
All right. You ready for our one question?
I am ready for our one question.
It's directed directly at you, and it comes to us from Kenneth in Tacoma, Washington. Brian, who is your favorite hockey player? That is
right. Well, of all time, ironically, I mentioned it earlier in this episode. My favorite player of all time is Patrice Bergeron. His skill and his two-way skill and his huge humanitarian personality. Just the nicest guy from all accounts. Great player. Obviously going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, 5-time Selke winner, 6-time Selke winner. It's hard to keep track because it seems like he won it every other year the last 10 years. Just the embodiment of what it means to be a good hockey player. And obviously was never like 100-point guy, but nobody was as good in the face-off dot, and nobody was a better back checker than him as far as forwards are concerned. He was just an all-world player, obviously gold medal Olympian, World Cup winner. He's part of the Triple Gold Club, plus he's won a few others. Just a great player. As far as current player goes, it's tough to say. Obviously, being a Wild fan, I love Kirill Kaprizov. Jack Eichel in Vegas I've always been a big fan of his, and since he's gone to Vegas and exploded and become one of the best players, truly the best players in the league, it's just been so exciting to watch him. Honestly, obviously Connor McDavid is always fun to watch. If I had to pick just one though, I would have to say Kirill, just because I'm a Wild fan. He's so talented. He's such an unbelievably talented skater. He's obviously got a great shot, and as far the Wild offense goes, as far as he goes. So a guy that can will an entire team to victory night in and night out is always fun to watch. So I'm going to have to say all time, definitely Bergeron, but right now it's got to be my boy Kirill.
Valid answers for both of those. I like those. Also, Kenneth, I'm sorry I read that question like I was being an asshole. I'm just salty that it was directed at Brian and not me.
I'll give an honorable mention to Cale Makar, because it's incredible how a defenseman can drive play and score a point a game and play half an hour a night and just do everything for one team from the back end. So I'll give an honorable mention to Cale Makar. He's unbelievably skilled.
Another answer that I truly agree with. So thank you, Kenneth, for sending in that question. Thanks for listening to the show. That's probably the biggest one there. We appreciate that. If you want to send us a question on this show, you can email us. Well, first of all, you can send us a DM on either Facebook or Instagram at Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. You can also email us at freshicehockeypodcast@gmail.com or at contact at freshicehockeypodcast.com. Oh man, guys, I'm sorry. I'm kind of killing it right now. I'm still battling this sickness I had last week, and it's just messing me up. Brian, did I miss anything or mispronounce anything on that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think you hit it all on the head.
Okay.
Let's get into our Blue Jackets segment. Again, thanks again, Kenneth, for the question as well. And please, yeah, like Andrew said, get those questions in because we would like to answer more of those on the show. Going into our Blue Jackets segment, real quick at the deadline, they pick up Luke Cunnin from the Sharks. Good depth pickup for them. Again, as you're approaching the playoffs, you don't want to sell the farm to try and, get into the playoffs when you're in a position like the Blue Jackets are, but adding some depth to a team that's shown that it can make the playoffs certainly instills confidence in the roster. Even again, it was a small addition, but Luke Cunnin's a very serviceable NHL player. I think he'll get some great chances with the Jackets lineup, and again with the Monahan injury, adding more up front could never hurt. The big news for the Jackets this week: they signed Matthew Olivier to a 6-year, $3 million a year contract extension. Olivier, so far this season, is having a career year. He is already at his career high in points. If he plays the rest of the season, he'll have his career high in games played as well. Career high average time on ice. He has instilled his name as the premier tough guy in the National Hockey League. I don't think anybody can fight better than him, but he can still produce. Obviously, being a minus isn't great, but again, it's the Jackets. They're just fighting for their lives right now, and we talk about guys that are big energy and big vibes guys. That's definitely what Olivier brings to the table. He takes a very team friendly cap hit, I would say, for the role he plays, because it's hard to find a guy that can fight and score and skate. So to produce, 0.3 point a game kind of guy, but just to be able to do that and still carry the energy for the whole team. I mean, if not for the fact that Boone Jenner and Zach Werenski and guys like that are on this team, this guy could be the captain of a team.
I was just going to say that.
To me, he, and to a lesser extent, because this guy was a better scorer, but he gives me kind of that Dustin Brown energy where he's just tough as nails. But he can still be responsible, and he's not an asshole. He's not dirty. He's just, although Brown sometimes kind of crossed the line, I thought, but kind of, again, third line kind of guy, but he brings the energy, and that's the kind of guy you would look for a captain. But again, Boone Jenner is a great captain for this team. If not for him, it would easily be Zach Werenski. So he's surrounded by just a great group of leadership, and he contributes to helping this team, even though he doesn't have to wear a letter on his jersey. Just a great player who's earned his keep, and again locks up a lifetime of riches. And he's again more importantly for his personal life, locks down a place to live for at least the next 6 years, and hopefully for the rest of his career.
Yeah, I think he's a good example of what the future looks like for Columbus moving forward. Like I said, I've always been a big fan of the guy. Like you've been watching him since his minor league days. So
yes, sir. In Milwaukee, absolutely.
Yeah, he's a fan favorite. Everybody likes the guy, whether you're a fan or a fellow player. Everybody loves him. And like Brian said, I'm kind of mad that he said it because I wanted to, but I could definitely see him being the captain if it weren't for guys like Werenski or Boone Jenner. Just an all-around great signing for him and for Columbus. He's exactly the kind of guy you want on your team, a guy that can throw down and score. You can't ask for anything better than that. So I think locking him down long-term was excellent for Columbus. And like you said, it gives them a stable place to live for the next several years. So
yeah, which that's important. And that's one thing we don't think about when we think about, oh, this guy should go here, this guy should sign here. These guys have lives, they have families, they don't want to move every season. Like, it's important to these guys. And again, I know it's tougher for bottom six players like this, but again, to get a 6-year contract for Olivier, I mean, that's huge. That'll take him till he's 34. I mean, this guy's got a chance to really get his roots down with his family. get his life settled in. And truthfully, you know what, at the end of this contract, he'll be almost 35. If he wants to hang it up, he can, because you typically see this with guys who are not, I don't want to call him an enforcer. He's more of a grinding role, but you think of a guy like Gregory Campbell or Sean Thornton, and these guys get into their mid 30s and they kind of lose that edge that they have in their mid to late 20s. And so this contract could very well take him into retirement if he wants him to. It's a lifetime worth of riches. And this is a guy who just gets hockey, and I could see him. So we've mentioned this with Sam Reinhart, and a lot of people have with Sam Reinhart, but I could see this guy being a coach when he's done. He just gets it. He doesn't try and do too much. He plays his role. He plays it extremely effectively, and very fortunate that he's on the Blue Jackets. And it now makes me wonder what the hell the Preds were thinking not keeping this guy, because again, he was a menace when he was with the Milwaukee Admirals. He didn't get a ton of games with the Predators. I want to say he only played about 50 or 60 games with them total, but definitely one where they maybe now regret it. And I know he didn't produce a lot when he was with the Predators, but boy, has he really flourished with the Jackets. Obviously he's a big penalty minute accumulator, being a fighter. Right now he's got 118 penalty minutes on the season. And yes, he played 48 games with the Predators. So only 7 points to show over those games. So I get it, maybe why they moved on, but boy, has he really flourished here in Columbus. And hopefully he does stay the entirety of this contract and is with this team as it continues to grow into hopefully one of the elite teams in the league someday soon.
I concur.
All right. So we covered pretty much everything I think we wanted to from the deadline. I don't think we missed any of the major trades, but again, there weren't really a ton of trades that happened at the deadline. Obviously we know, like last week we had the Jones and the Spencer Knight trade, the Chicago and Florida swap. Looks like Spencer Knight's had a couple of really good games with the Blackhawks so far. Seth Jones, I think, will be a perfect fit in Florida. They need some, I don't want to say need some defensive help, but again, not having the Montour for their playoff run this year is going to suck. So a guy like Seth Jones who can play 25 minutes a night, it's going to be exactly what the Panthers need here. So I'm excited to see what they do.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it's going to be exciting to watch. That's literally what I was going to say.
So now that, with that in mind, now we want to look towards the playoffs. Last year on this show, after we did our deadline show, you predicted that the Florida Panthers would win the Stanley Cup. Ultimately, that prediction ended up being correct, as they won it all last year in 7 games. Are you feeling any magic this year with any one specific team? Are you doubled down on your Panthers running it back? Is there a team that you think that could give them some problems? Is there, who in your mind is going to be why don't you pick me a Final Four right now as we sit, assuming nobody else gets injured? Who are your Final Four teams when we're getting towards the end of May into June?
You talk about for the conference finals?
Yep.
I'm going to say, oh man, God damn, this is going to be tough.
We made it too easy last year. We had you pick one. You picked one team to win it all. Now I got to make you pick 4 teams.
Fuck.
See how good you are.
Well, my thing is, because I want it for the East, I want to say Washington and Florida, but I feel like it could also be Washington and Tampa. I don't know. There's still so much time left right now. Anything can go anyway for as far as how teams are going to finish in the standings.
I would say there's still about 5 weeks worth of hockey left.
Yeah,
so truly anything can happen. Again, we'll do a proper playoff preview show as we did last year. It was just beyond fascinated that you nailed your Stanley Cup pick last year. Now, obviously, it helped you being a fan that you're like, of course, my guys can do it. But you look at the team they had last year, and of course, it's like, yeah, this is a good enough team to win it all.
Well, I was saying I maintained that stance since like February, or right at the trade deadline last year. I said the Panthers were going to win it. Just for now, this is just hypothetical because we got 5 weeks left. Anything can still happen as far as standings go. So just to throw some random shit out there right now, I'm going to say for the East, I'll say Florida and Washington. For the West, this is the one that's hard because, God, they have some fucking juggernauts in the West. But I'm going to say Dallas and Vegas.
I like it. Yeah. I think all 4, I'll be honest with you, my teams in the East perfectly match it. First of all, I think if not the Panthers, then Tampa Bay, but the Panthers have shown in the last few years that they can not only hang with Tampa Bay, but they can beat them. So I think I'm going to go in the East. I'm going to go with the Panthers again. I'm going to go with the hot hand. They're having an incredible season. They added at the deadline. They're better than they were last year, more, I would say. And again, they're probably at some point going to see Tampa here. I think they can still beat them as good as Tampa Bay is. And it's no disrespect to Tampa. It's just these are two elite teams. So I'm going to go with Florida as well. I'm going to go with Washington because you look at what's left. Okay, the wild card teams. It's going to be one of Ottawa, Detroit, New York, Columbus. I think Washington matches up very well against those teams, especially the Rangers now that they're a skeleton of their former selves. I think Washington easily handles any of those teams. And you look at New Jersey, who is now on life support with Jack Hughes being gone, and Carolina, who I pick on them a lot. But again, the lack of playoff success hurts. I don't think they're going to get it done with Freddie Anderson. And I think after already going through a playoff series in round one, assuming the Hurricanes win a first round matchup, I think Washington easily handles the first two rounds. If this team as they are now, if that translates to their exact style of play in the playoffs, I see them walking into the conference finals. Now, I think that might be where the road ends for them, but I think you hit it right on the head. Washington, Florida, it just makes so much sense. And assuming everybody stays healthy, it's hard to see, other than Tampa, it's hard to see any of those other teams making it that far. In the West, I think, again, Vegas in a similar spot as Washington, where, first of all, Vegas is an incredible team. So I don't think they'll have any issues anyways. But you look at the fact that LA hasn't been great lately, the fact that Edmonton hasn't been very great lately, and that the fact that the wild card teams, you're either getting the Wild, the Flames, or maybe the Canucks, all teams that they can very easily beat if they go up against them. I think it's easy to find Vegas in the conference final. The hard one is the Central Division. All three of those top three teams right now are unbelievably good. There's a great argument for all of them to make it to the conference final. For me, I'm picking Colorado, and I'm going to stick with my guns. I've been saying that they're probably still the best team on paper in the league. And I'm going to stick with it there. I'm going to take them over Dallas and over Winnipeg because they've won in the past. They've proven they can do it. And I know they had a heartbreaking exit last year at the hands of Dallas nonetheless. But again, that's with Georgiev and that they took them 6 games deep and into overtime last year with Georgiev and that. I think with a much more balanced roster this year, again, with some, really good playoff performers on their roster and a serviceable Mackenzie Blackwood, I just don't see a way around Colorado. So I'm going to go with your teams in the East, Washington and Florida. In the West, I'm going to go Vegas and Colorado, the battle of the teams with the matching goal horns.
Yeah, dude, no shit. I don't hate those picks. I think those are great picks. Really, in the West right now, it's anybody's game at this point. So I don't really think there's a right or wrong answer at this point with 5 weeks left in the season. Yeah. I think as we zero in on playoff time, it'll be much easier to make a more scientifically backed prediction.
Yeah, and again, for what it's worth, if you gave me a time machine and fast forwarded me to July and you're like, hey, here's a picture of the Jets winning the Stanley Cup or the Stars winning the Stanley Cup or, whatever, I'd be like, yeah, it makes sense. Or not even win the Stanley Cup, but, they made it to the final and it wasn't Colorado and it wasn't Vegas or any of these guys. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Same thing in the East. You could show me Tampa Bay's in the final. I'd be like, yeah, I could see that. Yeah. Or, Washington's in the final. I'm like, I could see there's a way there for all these, but again, you look at some of those bottom teams, you look at the Hurricanes and the Devils and the Wild and the Flames and the Sens. It doesn't seem like there's enough there. And I will keep tooting this horn that the Hurricanes are not a good enough hockey team to make a deep playoff run. And they've proven it year over year. They didn't get better this year. In fact, they got considerably worse. They didn't address their clearly not effective enough goaltending. And again, I harp on them, but ultimately you just want a team that has the talent to go far, and they just refuse to get better where they need to. They can't score in the playoffs, and what did they do? They traded away their best scorer to get another best scorer, and then they traded him away to get a guy who is a good player, but is not better than either of the two that they traded. So they got worse. They didn't address their goaltending. It's hard for me to see the Canes and the Devils. No Jack Hughes. That kills them. And then, again, the wild card teams in both conferences, it's not that these are horribly god-awful teams. They're just not good enough to compete with these unbelievably stacked rosters, and that's just the reality. This is one of those years where it's almost like in March Madness where all the number one seeds are always picked to win because how the hell can anybody else beat them? It's kind of how it feels in the NHL right now. It's like nobody's beating these top teams, so let's just fast forward to the conference finals.
I agree. So Again, we'll make better predictions as we draw nearer to the playoffs. But for right now, that's where I'm sticking, and I don't dislike your answers. I think we're in good spots right now.
Yep, I would agree that we are probably. I don't think we'll be too far off. I mean, anything crazy can happen in the playoffs. Again, this all assumes nobody gets injured either. I mean, all of a sudden, I don't want to jinx anybody or cast any voodoo on anyone, so I don't want to give examples, but a star player goes down, all of a sudden the whole team's playoff outlook changes. I mean, the Devils are a perfect example. Jack Hughes goes down. Well, now they're not even close to a favorite if they ever were. And the same thing can be said of literally any of these other teams who have some of the best players in the world. So Only time will tell, but I just looking at it in a vacuum right now, assuming everyone's healthy, I think our picks are pretty damn spot on.
Yep. And again, time will tell.
All right, and with that, I think we are all good to go. We covered everything I had on the list. So if you don't have anything else, I think we are set to go. One thing I do want to mention, in a couple of weeks from now, it's not going to be next week, but we will have actually a couple guests, but one of them we haven't discussed a date with yet, so I don't want to give that away quite yet.
Correct, yeah. That's where I'm going to go with this.
But our friend of the show, Mark Mowers, who was on with us last year, currently a former NHL player, currently a scout for the Minnesota Wild, had him on last year. Fantastic guest. So we're hoping to have him on. The plan is to have him on March the 30th. So we'll keep our eyes open in a couple weeks for that as we iron out all the details with him. But again, we'll be looking forward to getting a good friend of ours back on the show as we approach the end of the season. And again, with the trade deadline passed, it'll be nice to have a pro scout on to talk to us about kind of how everything goes and the process of this. Obviously, we're not going to ask him any prying questions, but it'll be cool to have somebody who works within the league actively giving us their view on things and what their day-to-day life is like in their role. So it'd be very fun to have him on. I can't wait for that show. But in the time being, we have a lot of exciting hockey to watch down the stretch, and we can't wait to be along for the ride with everyone.
I agree. We're in for a good ride. It's going to be fun. We got some exciting guests coming up. And as far as the mystery guest that Brian mentioned, I should point out this guest is going to be the first active player we've had on this show. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Stay tuned to the show. Follow us on our social media platforms, TikTok at Fresh Ice Hockey Pod. At Fresh Ice Pod. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Fresh Ice Hockey Podcast. We will have all the updates on there. Other than that, I've got nothing left to say on here. Brian, take us home.
Yeah, that's it. We're all good to go for this week. So again, thanks you guys for tuning in. I know this was a little bit on the longer side of things, but we always appreciate you tuning in and staying till the end with us. So get those questions in and buckle up for these last 5 weeks of chaos. We'll see you next week.